Welcome back to EconLine, everyone. This video is going to be on the difference between product markets and resource markets, which you'll also hear called factor markets and things like that. So what we want to do is just start off with a quick review of circular flow, which you should remember from way back in Unit 1. Circular flow describes a relationship between firms and households in an economy, and in particular, how those firms and households extract resources or use resources to produce the products that everybody wants. When we draw the diagram, there are two relationships that we're looking at. First of all is how they are relating relative to goods that are being produced. So for example, let's take a look at the most obvious transaction for most of us, which is the product market. So you think about the product market and the household. What is the relationship between you and the product market? Well, you receive goods and services, so the products flow from the firms to you, and I'm going to put goods and services. And on the other hand, the money flows from you to the firms. The exact opposite is the case in the resource market. Households are being paid, but they are actually the ones that are selling. They sell the factors of production, like land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. So think of it like this. Everything in the economy is owned by an individual. Even if it's owned by a company, that company is eventually owned by an individual. So what we're saying is that the individuals own all the factors of production, or the households own them all. That they sell these to the businesses, who in turn use them to make products that they sell back to the households. Throughout the course to this point, we've talked almost entirely about how this transaction looks in the product market. We're going to look at it now in the resource market. And in particular, we're going to spend a lot of our time looking at labor. But there's just a couple of terms that we need to point out here that you should understand right at the beginning. In this unit, we're going to use terms like wage instead of, for example, price. Although wages are the same thing. In fact, we think about wage and interest, and rent. These are all just prices. They're prices that kind of have special names because they represent inputs in the production process. So let's check out the other labels here. So we definitely have a difference here in that we are doing price in our product market, but in our factor market it is going to be wage. On the x-axis in the product market we have been using Q for quantity, and here we're going to use L for labor. But really, labor is just the quantity of workers. So although this graph may look very different in the labels, we are still dealing with a price and a quantity, except we're using these labels instead to signify that we're dealing with a resource market and not a product market. So other than that, when we draw out these curves, we still have supply and demand, except those are different as well, with a couple of important respects. So I'll draw my curves now. In the product market, as you're familiar, demand is the household, and supply is the firm. But it's the exact opposite in the factor market. Supply, as we discussed earlier, is the household because they own the factors of production which they sell to the firms. The firms, on the other hand, are demand because they are the ones who are demanding labor, who are buying capital, and so on. So these are the basic differences between the market, or between the structure of the market and the graphs. The behavior of these markets are the same. If you have an increase in demand in this market, well, it would be the same as an increase in demand in the product market. So what would the results be? Well, in the product market, if demand goes up for our product, we know that the quantity is going to go up. And we also see that the price is going to go up. And this would be the same thing in our product market. We would see that if demand for labor went up, the number of a certain kind of worker would increase. So for example, if demand for plumbers went up, we'd see more plumbers get jobs. And if demand for plumbers were higher overall, we would probably see, or we would definitely see, an increase in their wage as well. So as you can see, the way the markets actually work themselves out, or the way they equilibrate and determine prices, is really the exact same process that we've seen in the product market. But ultimately, you just have to understand that the players in the game are on different sides. And so this is not quite the exact same thing, although it's still very similar. All right, check out our next lesson now, which is going to get more into product and factor market transactions.